Entropy. It's the natural order of things falling apart, systems unraveling, defenses weakening, chaos creeping in. In cybersecurity, we don't fight entropy, we chase after it. I'm Dave Lewis, Global Advisory CISO here at 1Password, and this is the Chasing Entropy Podcast. The podcast where we peel back the layers from our digital lives to reveal the human decisions, systemic cracks, and overlook patterns that put everything at risk. From boardrooms to breach reports, 0 days to zero trust, we're chasing the questions that keep security leaders awake at night, and the stories that don't necessarily make the headlines. No hype, no fight, just real talk with the minds shaping front lines of cybersecurity today. This week, I am very, very happy to be able to say that I have Brian Honan joining me on the podcast. Brian, welcome, and could you introduce yourself?
Dave, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on board. So, I'm Brian Honan. I'm CEO and founder of BH Consulting. We're a independent cybersecurity and data protection firm based out of Dublin. So, we've been going for 20 years, clients all over the world. I've been in security since before people even cared about IT security or cybersecurity or information security. I've been through all the different monikers and names of it over the years. But in my course of my career, I've set up BH Consulting. I've founded and set up Ireland's first computer emergency response team, iResearch, which, Dave, you've been very generous in your time and supporting us at our conference and speaking at it, and always very welcome to have you at it. But I've also advised and helped the Irish government in cybersecurity and various EU bodies as well. I've been a special advisor to Europol's Cybercrime Centre, EC3, so I've been a special advisor for them on internet security. And I'm currently a member of the advisory group for the European Agency for Cybersecurity in ESA. Trying to give my little whatever I can back to the community through those initiatives.
So in the event that you still carry business cards, is it a fold out to have all that on there? Or
it's funny, business cards, I haven't used one. I think COVID killed off the business cards, so...
There's a lot of truth in that. And at 1Password, I am literally the only person that actually has business cards. And that's simply because when I go to Asia, they're still part of the business interaction. They still respect that. But it's really amazing. It's like when we look back down the road of, how did we get to this point? You've listed off all these amazing things and you've had so many amazing accomplishments, and, you were regarded as, simultaneously a industry luminary, for want of a better term, and also a giant pain in my butt whenever I come to Dublin. So, and I'm very thankful for that as well.
Well, I work hard at both.
And you accomplish it swimmingly. But when we look back at how we got here, how did you get your start? Because invariably that question that pops up is, how do I get to where you are in your career? Yeah. And I keep telling people there's no straight line from point A to point B. And somebody's journey is going to be different from yours. But what are the lessons learned? And also, how did you get here? Like, what were the steps that got you on this path?
Well, Dave, I don't know how long we have to go through that, because it is a great question, and it's something that I've often been asked, probably like yourself. You've got young graduates or people starting off looking at a career in cybersecurity and say, "Hey, Brian, how can I get to where you are? What did you do to get to where you are?" And I think in some ways it's a very difficult question to answer, because I've been working in IT for nearly 40 years now. I started working in IT in the late 1980s and started getting involved in IT security in the early 90s. And there was no formal education around cybersecurity back then. There was no formal, even getting a formal education in computers. There was very few computer degrees out there. So a lot of where I've got was I'm happy to admit it, it's probably pure luck, being in the right place at the right time. When I started my IT career, majority of companies were still working on huge mainframes. My role when I joined the IT department in the company I was working in was to look after these new things called PCs, personal computers. They're a bit of a fad, but some of the managers like using them. So your job is to support them and look after them. And when we look back and we see how IT and computers have evolved over the years. So has my career. As the company I worked in, I worked with the first company there for 10 years as a life assurance company. So very conscious of the responsibilities when it came to protecting customer data. So moving stuff from mainframes down onto these LANs and mini computers and PCs and even later on then to laptops, luggables more so than laptops back then.
Remember those?
You still had to make sure that the information was secure. So I think the best education I ever got was actually working for that company and learning from the veterans who worked on the IBM mainframe, because they taught you the disciplines. So the technology is different and has changed over the years, but they taught you the disciplines of good change control, good project management, good backup strategies, recovery strategies, business continuity, disaster recovery, access control, all the things that we still struggle with to do well today, but we still were trying to struggle with it back then. But they gave you a good founding and basics. So yeah, over my career, it has just evolved. And I think any of us who's been involved in security from those days, we also had I'm just speaking for myself and those of my peers. We just had this inane curiosity. Well, how does this work? Why does it work this way? Can it not work better this way? Or what happens if I do this? And yes, invariably we end up breaking the machines or breaking the systems. But at the same time, we would be able to we're able to learn about those systems and learn how we can make them more secure and more stable and more reliable. And that's how, my path into cybersecurity, I would call it the original hacking, as in, whereas hacking systems and how to make them work better, as opposed to the media tainted version of hacking now as breaking into systems for criminal activity. And then that's how I started. So somebody asking me now, how would you start my career in cybersecurity? I would say you have to be able to, because cybersecurity is so popular now, you're going to have to make yourself stand out from the crowd, and why would I hire you with your first class honors degree in cybersecurity or forensics or whatever it is, instead of the person who I'm going to interview in the next 5 minutes who has the same qualifications as you? So you need to maybe show and demonstrate a passion for what you do. And that doesn't necessarily take a whole lot of extra time, but you do have to show time as maybe, blog about what you do, tinker around, share your thoughts. Don't worry that you might, like I know, Dave, you work with 1Password. So 1Password produces a lot of great material about password hygiene and password security, etc. But, don't be afraid of writing a similar blog or your own thoughts about password security. And just because somebody else has done it already doesn't mean you don't have a valid opinion. But by writing these things, you're demonstrating you've got a passion, you're demonstrating you've got an interest, and you get involved in the community. Our very good mutual friend Dave, Jack Daniel, will be well remembered for B-Sides conferences, and back 30, 20, 30, even 15 years ago, there was very few conferences dedicated to IT security. There's now lots of them around. B-Sides is a great way for engaging the community. And if you want to meet people and network and demonstrate how good you are or meet other people, B-Sides is a great way. Volunteer. Contribute to, respond to the call for papers. Take part in Capture the Flags. But demonstrate that you've got an interest and a passion, and that can help you bring it along. But I think the key things for a long-term career, that will get you. I think help you get you beyond the the interview, maybe get your first role. But if you want to maintain a career, is always be curious. It's a great thing of our industry is that, while the core tenets of IT and technology remain the same, the internet is still working the way it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. But there is new software, there's new ways of things, there's new technologies coming out, which is a great and challenging, but they present with security challenges as well. So always remain curious, remain remain patient. Security can often feel to be a thankless job because you're the person saying to the business, "No, you can't do that," and then and people are, so remain curious and patient, and yeah, don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, there's been so many times where people would refer to as the security practice as the Department of No, but the
Yes.
reality is security really is a business enabler. And like for example, you were talking about new technologies that present themselves. Like one of the ones that is really forefront with a lot of people is talking about agentic AI. And so
Mm.
we've seen, this growth. And I mean, from a technology perspective, it's amazing, being able to have agents that can make, autonomous decisions on your behalf to help, take care of part of the workload. Conceptually is a great idea, but I'm worried about the implementation from a security perspective. How are people protecting the organizations? Because these agents require credentials that are
Mhm.
often treated as a human identity, and that's the kind of thing that I worry about. And especially when you dial it back to something as simple as shadow IT, you see all of the potential exposures that can present themselves. Now, in your role at BH Consulting, you're talking to all sorts of CISOs around Europe and the UK. And how are you having this conversation with them about better securing their environment? And looking at how you can improve things from the CISO's perspective. Like we talked about people getting into the industry. What
Yeah.
about the people that have established their bona fides, because they still need help? And how are we, communicating that message, or more importantly, yourself?
Yeah, well, I think the key thing is, as you said, don't be Dr. No. Don't be the Department of No. Don't say, no, we can't use AI, or we're not going to use agentic AI, or we're not going to use LLMs, or we're not going to use shadow IT. Because guess what? People are going to use it anyway. Like I guarantee you, and maybe somebody listening to the podcast can correct me, but I would love to know which company 15 years ago or thereabouts had the CISO go to the CEO and say, "Do you know what would be a great idea? Let's give people smartphones. These new iPhones, these new Blackberries, let's just put them in place. It'd be great." And if you do dial back the time, it wasn't IT who drove that innovation in the business, and it definitely wasn't the CISO who drove that innovation. It was the CEO or the CFO who got a fancy new phone as a present at Christmas time or a birthday or as part of the renewal of the contract, and went, "Oh, I can get email on this."
Mm-hmm.
So is on as a CISO you have to say, okay, this is what these technologies. So today it's AI. In 2 years' time could be quantum computing, or 5 years' time could be quantum computing. It could be stuff in 5 years' time we haven't even thought about yet that's going to be coming into the business. And we
Absolutely.
need to understand how your business works, what is the value proposition of the business, how the business operates, what are its regulatory environment. Because I have a good example about agentic AI being potentially bad, even though people think it's good. But is understand your business and then look at what are the business risks, and then align the technologies along with that to say, okay, technology can enable us to do this better. But instead of saying no to technology or no to agentic AI or whatever it may be, is saying, how can we make this secure? How can we do this in a secure way? So if the business comes and says to you, we want to deploy agentic AI for customer relationship management, the answer should not be no. The answer is go, yes, let me look at that and I'll get back to you to see how we can do it in a secure way with proposals and what we might need to do to do that. And now you've got your, you're embracing the change, the concept, and the business is hopefully going to be on side. But one good example I had from a client just a few weeks ago was this client is a large client. It's traded on the stock market. So obviously any information pre-announcements has to be kept secure to prevent insider trading.
Oh yes.
While they're on the conference call, their Zoom or whatever Teams, whatever they're using, somebody noticed this guest on the call, which was an AI agent that was automatically taking the notes of the call to generate the minutes of the call. And nobody knew who, well, I suppose one person knew who was using it, but nobody admitted to who was using that as their agent. So here you had a highly regulated situation where sensitive information was going to an agent that nobody knew anything about, that could have been transcribed in a data center somewhere outside of the jurisdiction, or could have broken other regulatory laws. So it's educating and engaging the business so they understand what the risks are, that if they want to bring these technologies in, they can do so in a safe way.
Absolutely. And you touched on a very key piece of the puzzle there is, about data sovereignty. It's like, where are you storing your data? And I mean, each different geographical theater has their own rules and regulations depending on where you are in the world. But often that is something that is missed in technology offerings, in that companies don't always think it through as to the requirements for data sovereignty for various parts of the world. So I've seen you had a couple of interviews that you did around this very topic, and I was wondering if you could care to elaborate on data sovereignty as an issue today, especially in the EU.
Yeah, so I suppose ironically, I think the biggest story that has brought data sovereignty to the fore has been TikTok. And the furore over the past 2 or 3 years, particularly in the US, about the when I say the phrase scaremongering, and we'll probably be flamed online as a result, but the scaremongering by the US government about, China is going to spy on everybody through TikTok because they have access to everybody's information. It's going to be access to the information on the devices, but also on TikTok servers. The Chinese government can gain access to that information, and that could pose security and privacy threats. But in reality, many of us in the EU and who rely on non-EU technology, and the biggest technology players in the world tend to be either US or Chinese based, our data is potentially stored on data centers or in providers that are non-EU based, and therefore you as a regulated entity. So the key regulation you have in the EU is the General Data Protection Regulation. And lots of people go, that's a very stringent thing on data, and they blame the GDPR for all these cookie notices being popped up every time you access a website, and how make them harder to do things. But in a way, laws and regulations are implemented to control what people, and in this case, particular corporations, are doing wrong or unethically. If corporations were not using our personal data to sell on to marketeers, to process in ways they want to do, or to misuse and abuse in any way, shape, or form they want it, we wouldn't need to have privacy laws. But because corporations are doing this, we have to have privacy laws. And I think core thing with the GDPR, it's the General Data Protection Regulation. So the D is the big one that jumps out. People think data. But in reality, the fundamental thing of GDPR is that it's protecting people's rights. They're human rights, and they're protecting people. So I often say, tongue in cheek, I might add, that we should have called the GDPR the GPPR, the General Person Protection Regulation. Because when you do look at how governments have been able to look at data and misuse data, and we've heard stories from the US now about is it Doge or DOGE, how they've been accessing different databases in the US government so they can target certain, cutbacks and people for different reasons. That should raise alarm bells. If a government has access to that type of information, we should be able to trust the government to do that. And if they're going to throw that trust out, well then why should we give our information over, particularly with governments, because we've no choice in many cases but to hand our data over. So when you come to data sovereignty, if you've got EU organizations, be they private sector or public sector, and they're using technologies provided from outside of the EU, for example, Microsoft 365 or Google or AWS, these are organizations, or TikTok, these are companies regulated by foreign governments, and those foreign governments can dictate to those companies what to do with that information. So yes, they might have their data center physically located in the EU and say your data never leaves the EU. But particularly from a US point of view, and this is where it's come to the head lately, is the tariff wars. So the fear is that US are pushing tariffs onto the EU, not just to change prices, but also to force the EU to change its regulations on how US companies can use EU citizens' data. So, if those talks don't work out, what's to stop the US government turning around to Microsoft and saying, turn off all services to EU customers? Or, the case I used in the article that you mentioned is that one of the chief prosecutors for the International Criminal Court has had his email and Microsoft services turned off by Microsoft on foot of the US government. Yes, so he can't.
I've not heard about that one.
Yeah, it's I can't remember the gentleman's name in full, but I think it's Khan. And as a result of his investigations, he's been sanctioned by the US government, and anybody providing any services or support to him could also be sanctioned. So he's had to move his email and every other services over to Proton Mail, which is based in Switzerland, as a result of access being cut off by Microsoft. And similarly, there's been a university and a company in China haven't had their services turned off as well as a result of sanctions. So when it comes to data sovereignty, this is something that you have to start looking at now to see, well, where is your data? Not only where is it stored, but what jurisdictions and what laws could impact the organizations providing you those services on, for the gaining access to your data or shutting off access to it completely. So, in many cases, there may not be a whole lot you can do, but you may have to put this on your risk register now and determine, okay, if this happens, we need to consider doing A, B, and C.
I have to admit, I never considered weaponization of data that's held by governments as a potential threat, although it does seem pretty much logical when you take a step back and look at it through the lens of hindsight.
Aren't you glad you don't live in my head, Dave?
Oh, yes, I'd be screaming all day long.
I scream all night as a result.
So like when we're looking at, threats that are presented, even, indirect ones that we might not have considered before, when we look at the rapid change of technology, we see the advent of agentic AI and all other sorts of things like that. What sort of, next attacks should people be considering as, what should be added to that risk register in addition to how the data is being used? Like, is it AI driven attacks, IoT vulnerabilities? Like, where is the next sweet spot in your estimation as to what we should really be paying attention to?
I think where we're paying a lot of attention, we need to pay more attention to is, look, technology we're using today. So I'm running Windows 11 on this laptop. I have an Apple iPhone. I've got a lot of confidence that those operating systems are relatively secure. No such thing as 100% security, but they're relatively secure. But if I'm connecting an IoT device to my corporate network, and that IoT device is now going to be operated by cloud-based AI agents, that's ringing a lot of alarm bells in my head. And I think that's where, as CISOs, we need to move away from thinking the old traditional, and I know many haven't, but we tend to fall back on, oh, we're protecting devices, we're protecting networks. We're not. We need to protect the data, and we need to understand where the weaknesses are in our supply chain as a result. Like if you look at any modern business now, particularly post COVID, many went to the cloud and have started to outsource and rely on third-party vendors. And if you look at the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report and other good reports like that, you can see the number of supply chain attacks are growing. And then supply chain attacks can happen in multiple ways. It's either uh, one of your vendors gets compromised and the attackers gain access to your network through a VPN or a connection some way like that, or they have, for example, over here in Europe and in the UK in particular, there's a large supermarket chain called Marks and Spencers, who looks like their IT MSP may have been a point of attack. Now that's not confirmed yet, but it looks like it's been investigated where the account for one of the support people from that company seems to have been hijacked and then used by criminals to convince staff within the organization to install remote management software on the computers. And I think that's where the criminals are looking at ways to get in. So it's going to be either through your supply chain, as I said, through connections you have directly with vendors, or through software or hardware that you're using as well. So Move was a good example. SolarWinds would have been a good example where software that is widely used is compromised, so criminals can gain that access that way. And then also, we need to stop looking for known bad. And what I mean by that is stop looking for malware, stop looking for port scans and stuff. No, sorry, let me rewind. We can't stop looking for that stuff because it's happening anyway. But the way criminals are operating now is they're using legitimate software and legitimate tools and legitimate avenues in your business. So, if criminals want to ransom your company, they're going to install remote management software on your computer that your help desk might be using. And they're going to use that then, So it's taking a holistic view.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to jump in there. Like just a couple days ago, I saw this one where two well-known calendar companies were sending out calendar invites. Obviously, not the company, but the attackers were using this legitimate software to set up these meetings, and then install malicious software on those clients. And it's absolutely staggering to see. The attackers are constantly looking for that new and exciting way to cause you heartburn. And you're absolutely right. It's not the the whatever .doc.exe thing anymore. It's it's actually legit software.
Yeah.
So what would you say to CISOs as how could they best protect themselves against what may seem like legitimate software?
Well, the best thing to do is to try and understand how your business works, where your people are located. Like traditionally, if everybody was located in an office, you could just monitor a network and understand what the normal behavior of your network was, and if anything outside of that normal behavior happened, that could trigger alarms. But that's what you should do anyway, because we have hybrid facilities and people still work in offices and stuff. So understand what a normal network looks like. And if you see normal traffic going to unusual destinations, like FTP traffic going to a server, an IP address that's based somewhere in Asia or Russia, and you've never had to business there before, and that should be triggering alerts. It's look for unusual behavior. Have good endpoint detection on devices and restrict access to those devices. If you do have an official remote management software tool, well, make sure that one is the one that's installed and authorized to be on an endpoint device, not other third-party tools, etc. So it's looking at look at things at that way to see what is going to trigger unusual. And all of that means you need to have a very good, solid, robust SOC, either internally or externally, with good software and indeed AI to analyze and alert on that data as it happens. Because suddenly, if you're going from looking just for bad stuff, traditional bad stuff, to now looking for, well, yeah, we're still looking for the traditional bad stuff, but we're also now looking for unusual good stuff.
Yeah.
That's going to increase the volume of what you need to analyze and respond to.
We've gotten to that point where it's like Doctor Strange looking at the multiverse, all the 14 million different possibilities.
There you go. So as we said at the very beginning of the call, if you want to stay in this career, stay curious, stay patient, and uh, have a good sense of humor, because you're going to need it.
That's the truth for sure. Well, I think that is actually an excellent point for us to leave off on. I really do appreciate you taking the time today. As always, it's always lovely to see you. And I look
Yeah,
forward to being back in Dublin in September, actually. I'll be
yeah.
sure to look you up.
We'll have to have this conversation over a few Guinnesses.
Oh, yeah. Twist the rubber arm. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to our listeners for checking out the Chasing Entropy podcast this week. My name is Dave Lewis. Please be sure to like and subscribe and all that sort of fun stuff. And have a great rest of your week. Thank you very much for listening.